Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are learning Mishnah's Nedarim. We are in Perek Gimel, Chapter 3, Mishna Daled, Mishna 4. Okay, so yesterday we spoke about a category of Nedarim called Nidrei Oinsim, which means the Nedarim that of unavoidable circumstances. And the case was where basically the condition of the Neder was that he should come eat by him, but he wasn't able to get there because he got sick, his son got sick, he couldn't cross over a body of water that got in the way, and therefore those situations we say that the neder does not take place because we know that the person who made the vow never intended that the condition should never intended to make the vow under these kinds of conditions where the fulfillment came about because of unavoidable circumstances. So now the next Mishnah is also falls under this category, it seems, from the way they explained it here. It's another type of neder of unavoidable circumstances, but it's a very different kind of situation. And here's the case. Neidrin laharagin v'lacharamin v'lamoichsin shehi truma, alphabi she'ena truma. A person can make a vow to, let me just translate, to murderers, robbers, are self-appointed tax collectors, that the food is truma, and it's really not. So that means like this. You had these people who would come into your home and kill you and rob your stuff. So if you could convince them that it wasn't worth them taking your stuff, they leave you alone. So what do? You say about the food or the grain, whatever that they want to take, you say it's truma. Now, interesting, right? These people are ready to kill you for your stuff. But if you tell them that it's truma, they're not going to bother you. Which means that's the case. That was the situation. Apparently, these people were Jewish. You'd assume that's the only reason why truma would bother them. And it's like, I murder and steal, but I only eat kosher. That's what it seems like. But they wouldn't bother you if it was truma. They leave it alone.
Religious thieves.
Either because of religious reason, or there's another explanation given that it's more practical, which is that truma is not worth a lot of money. The only people who can eat truma are kohanim that are tahar. That means the value of truma is very little. So why bother? So therefore, what you're doing here is, so basically, you're trying to convince them that this is truma, right? You're trying to convince them this is truma. So what do? You go ahead and you say to them, basically, that, you say the example they give here, which is brought down from the Gemara, is the person says, all the fruits of the world, I make a neder, all the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me if this is not truma. You're trying to convince him to say that it's truma. He should believe that it's truma by making a neder. And by saying that all the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me if this is not truma. And it's not true. It's not truma. It's not truma. But at the end of the day, you are trying to convince them through the neder that to get them off your back. Now, this is falling under the category of a neder under unavoidable circumstances. Call it duress. They're falling under the category of unavoidable circumstances. And we're saying that in this case, if we're calling it a neder of unavoidable circumstances, that means that we say that this neder isn't going to hold. It's not going to hold. Now, it's interesting that the way that another thing is like this. Another thing is that another example of a neder that you're trying to convince the person not to take your stuff is shehein shel beis hamelech. That somehow or another, meaning if it's not food, they're trying to take away some kind of article of yours. So you make a neder to them that this article belongs to the king. It's royal property. How do you have royal property? I don't know. But you have it. And you're trying to convince him that you have the royal property by saying that, if this is not royal property, then all the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me. So the Mishna is saying that, shein shel beis hamelech, the second example, they belong to the king, even though it's not true that it's not the beis hamelech. So these are considered nedarim of einsim, nedarim being made under unavoidable circumstances, which in yesterday's case, the halacha was that it's not a neder. Now here in this case, they bring down here in the notes a couple of interesting things. So first of all, just to get back to the beginning of the Mishnah, of the three examples that are given, it says you're making a neder to haragin, which means murderers. Haramin means robbers. That means they're going to take your stuff, but they're not going to kill you. And meichsin means self-appointed tax collectors. People who somehow or another, get themselves probably a group of thugs who would basically that would help them collect taxes, in a situation where they really weren't legit. So all these are cases where people are taking things away from you in a wrong way, and you're trying to stop them through this neder by saying, if this is not truma, all the fruits of the rosh will be forbidden on me. Doing that to convince them that it's not worth, they shouldn't be taking it. But what the Rabbi Tanura points out, number one, is like this: if he were a real tax collector, I'm reading from the notes, if he were a real tax collector, was appointed by the government, one would be required to pay him. It is a halachic obligation to observe the secular laws of any government, whether it is Jewish or non-Jewish. And therefore, it is certainly forbidden to make a false neder or shua to avoid payment of legal taxes. So therefore, the explanation of meichsin, which means tax collector, means a self-appointed one, which means it's illegal. Now, when this person makes the vow to convince the thief that, let's say, makes the vow that it's truma, he says, if this is not truma, all the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me. That's to convince the guy that's truma. Mm-hmm. Now, when you make that neder, right, your neder it's conditional, right? All the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me if it's not truma, which means trying to say it is truma, mm-hmm. which really means that your neder should take effect. Yeah. But we're saying that it's nidrei einsim. It's a neder from unavoidable circumstances. But over here, we don't say, I'm not sure why, but over here we don't say that it's just completely not a valid neder. But rather it's like this. When this person makes that neder and says that the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me if this is not truma, the connotation of that is, the implication of that is, how long will they be forbidden for? Forever. He just says the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me if this is not truma. Now, if that neder takes place, you're not going to be able to eat fruits. So therefore, that means it's a real neder. And we're trying to say it's an nidrei einsim, which means in some way it's not going to be a valid neder. So the notes brings down here from the Gemara that the person has in mind, he doesn't say it, because if he says it, he's giving away. In his mind, he says, the fruits of the world should be forbidden to me only today. He doesn't say that to the robber. If he says that to the robber, he's not his persuasion isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. So he says the fruits of the world should be forbidden on me, but in his mind he says just for today, and it would seem that for that day they will be forbidden. Yeah. Now, what's the novelty of what the Mishnah is teaching us is this is something mentioned before, and that is that under regular circumstances, if you were to say to a person, or you were to say, that loaf of bread is forbidden on me forever. But in your mind you meant only for one day. Would that work? It wouldn't work. It's called Dvar Mishabalev. It's called words of the heart. When you say something that implies that really has an implication of one thing, you say it should be forbidden. That means forever. And you say, I had in mind it only should be for one day. It's not going to work. Because that's Dvar Mishabalev, words of the heart. They have no effect. And which you said, is going to work. Now, the Mishnah here is teaching us that under these circumstances, where you're trying to persuade the robber to leave you alone, then we say that what you had in your mind will be effective. We will follow what you say. So when you have in mind, when you're trying to convince him to leave you alone, and you have in mind that, and you say to him, the fruits of the earth should be forbidden for me, if this is truma, if this is not truma, you have in mind the fruits of the earth should be forbidden for me only for one day, which is not the words that you said, but it's what you had in mind. Under these circumstances, we say we follow what you had in your heart. And therefore, again, the way I understand it is that these fruits will be forbidden for one day. It's just that there's a novelty here by this kind of vow that we call it a neder, because a neder of unavoidable circumstances, which is the whole context of what this is happening under. Under this situation, we say that what you had in mind, although it contradicts what you said, we will follow what you had in mind, and the neder will only be for one day. So that is what happens here at the end, where this person tried to convince these people not to take his stuff. He makes a neder about something that's really not true, but he's saying it in order to persuade them. The neder is going to be valid at some level. But the novelty is that what you said will be limited by what you thought, what you had in mind. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.